Fate of South Carolina's voter ID law rests with the federal judges. Up next, Attorney General Alan Wilson on why he hopes that the law is going to stick around. It's coming up in the second hour of America's News Headquarters. From voter ID laws to health care law and fight over that, and from immigration laws to the new financial regulations, the Obama administration has been doing battle with states across the country. Joining us now, two state attorneys general who find themselves in the middle of these legal showdowns. From Oklahoma, Scott Pruitt, and from South Carolina, Alan Wilson. Gentlemen, welcome.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Shannon.
All right, General Wilson, I want to start with you. Let's talk about South Carolina's voter ID law. Requires various forms of voter ID for those who are going to show up and vote. It's been argued before a panel of federal judges now. Do you think it survives?
Well, first off, we always knew this was going to be an uphill battle just because you look at who you're fighting. South Carolina has gone to great lengths over the last several years to craft a law that protects the integrity of the ballot box while ensuring the individual right to vote is not touched and that it remains sacred. And South Carolina stands by its law. We believe we have a good law, and we are guardedly optimistic that we will prevail, but you just never know in these types of cases.
And from what I understand, there basically would be a pass this year if the law is upheld and implemented. People can argue that they have a reasonable impediment, a reason that they couldn't get a photo ID in time for the election. From what I understand, they're allowed to cast a provisional ballot that can be contested at some point, so it wouldn't stop someone from voting if they've got a good excuse.
Well, first off, no one will be allowed, or no one will be prevented from voting once this law were to go into effect. So it will be just as it was before the law goes into effect. Just like you said, we'll have a reasonable impediment provision that allows people to vote should they not have a photo ID, and they can still use their voter registration card with a photo attached to it.
All right, the voter ID fight is one, involving several states at this point. I want to transition over to General Pruitt in Oklahoma. Now, you are the only state, as I understand it, that has now an active, ongoing case against the president's health care law. You've got concerns with how it would be implemented, some IRS powers. Tell us about the case that you have going right now.
Shannon, you are correct. When we filed our lawsuit in January of 2011, we began the litigation, and then it was stayed eventually by the federal court judge here in Oklahoma while the Supreme Court dealt with the issue at the U.S. Supreme Court level. When the decision came down in June, we began evaluating that decision. And there are two primary responsibilities that states have under the health care law. One is to decide whether Medicaid should be expanded in the respective states. We've already seen that the federal government tried to exert more power there than what was granted, and the court by a 7-2 vote said that they could not intimidate or coerce the states to adopt or expand Medicaid. But the other important part of the health care law is the expansion or the use of health care exchanges. And there are about 20 states, as you know, Shannon, across the country that have chosen not to implement a state exchange. In those states, there are questions about this IRS rule that was adopted May 18th. The IRS has come out and said they're going to assess an employer mandate penalty in states whether they've adopted exchange or not. We believe that's inconsistent with the Affordable Care Act, and consequently we amended our complaint here in Oklahoma to challenge the IRS rule that was adopted May 18th.
All right, I want to talk to you about a case now that both of your states are involved with. General Pruitt, I'll start with you, and this has to do with the Dodd-Frank legislation that was passed recently. It deals with regulating Wall Street and financial entities and organizations. You are worried, among other things, about the fact that it would call for liquidation of certain financial entities. General Pruitt, what is your concern there?
Well, Title II under the Dodd-Frank law, and by the way, Shannon, both Dodd-Frank and the Affordable Care Act represent an attitude that's been permeating in Washington for the last 2 years. It's an attitude that Washington knows best. They tried to seize the health care sector of our economy through the Affordable Care Act, and through Dodd-Frank, they did the same with the financial sector. On the heels of 2008, 2009, Senator Dodd and Congressman Frank tried to consolidate and did consolidate power in Washington, and did so pretty dramatically with Title II liquidation authority. Under Title II, the Secretary of the Treasury can come in and literally liquidate and seize a financial institution, and the only thing that's stopping that action from occurring is 24 hours notice. And creditors in states like South Carolina and Oklahoma, we have pension funds that are investors of institutions that may, in the future, be liquidated. And consequently, we deserve notice. We believe that the decisions made in Dodd-Frank violate fundamental due process and separation of powers, and that's at the heart of our challenge with Dodd-Frank that's now pending in the D.C. court.
General, we'll give you the last word here on why South Carolina decided to get involved as well.
Well, I echo what General Pruitt said. This is not about ensuring or protecting the financial industry from another 2008 crisis. Like in Obamacare, this is about centralizing power in the federal government. If you look at the 2,300-page law that is the Dodd-Frank Act, you will not find any provisions that restrict or protect or regulate Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, two of the culprits, primary culprits in the 2008 subprime mortgage mess that started the 2008 meltdown. Why aren't those addressed? This is about ensuring that the federal government has control, and anytime the federal government takes control of anything, the cost of that gets borne by the consumers. That's right, of small business owners who need small business loans and consumers who use banking. That is where the cost of this law is going to hit people the most.
All right, General Wilson, General Pruitt, we thank you both, gentlemen, for your time today.